to ask the maximally bland and broad question, where are we at with climate change in 2022? How existentially worried should we be? What is the bad news, but also what is the good news? Where are the areas where we're making progress?
I think we're doing much better than we have the right to expect, to be honest. And partially that's a knock on people like me who assumed the way we'd make progress on this global issue is by a globally binding treaty of some description, which is not the way we've made progress at all. In fact, we've made progress largely because technologies of cheap energy cheap and carbon-free energy have developed so rapidly, and so every year the International Energy Agency would put out these forecasts of how much it thought solar power is going to increase worldwide, and every year they would be shockingly inaccurate on the pessimistic side, and they seem never to learn their mistake. But anyway, so year after year we've been sort of outperforming on that measure. For example, we are pretty close to peak global carbon dioxide output, and all of this thanks to the involvement of millions of people, some fantastic scientific breakthroughs, a lot of government money going to research and development, not a big international solution. But broadly, I think we are in a better place than we might expect. And it goes back somewhat to the discussion we were having earlier about sort of stuff versus non-stuff problems. Climate is basically a stuff problem. It is
it's the mother of all stuff problems, but it's a stuff problem nonetheless.
And so those are the problems that sort of traditionally we've actually been comparatively good at dealing with, and we've done it in the way that should come as no surprise to anybody who thinks that non-stuff progress is less fast. We didn't do it by creating a brand new global institution. We did it through sort of technology advance and so on and so forth, which is not to downplay. I think the wonderful recent news out of Washington around actually getting way more finance and incentives for clean energy and so on. I do think that's a really important part of the story, but it wasn't a global institutional story in the way that I admit I thought was probably the way we would solve this problem. And we're a long way from solving it. Obviously, I don't want to get over the top with excitement, but as I say, I think we've made more progress than people like me, at least, had any rights to expect.
Help put a little bit of meat on the bones of your relative optimism. So, people who are listening to this and who will say, but the temperatures are rising and we haven't had the agreements, and there's all these nightmare scenarios about, runaway feedback loops. What can you say to them to reassure them that actually some progress is happening? What are some concrete measures or metrics which should convince them that, if their perception is actually nothing is really happening and things are only getting worse? Where does your different interpretation come from, and what can you say to them to sort of explain your point of view?
I guess that greenhouse gas emissions and economic output have decoupled in the richest countries. Greenhouse gas emissions are going down. Economic growth is not what we might hope, but it's still going up. We seem to have managed, at least in the richer countries, the thing that needs to happen, which is decoupling output from greenhouse gas emissions to some extent. Again, there is a long way to go. We need, in some ways, we've made the most progress on the easy stuff. Not surprisingly, I mean, energy production is not the only thing that has to change. Cement is still a massive producer of greenhouse gases, and we haven't made as much progress in making cement production less of an issue, and so on and so forth. But we have made all of this progress, and importantly, we've made it by making the technologies of zero carbon output cheap. And the reason that's really important is it means that what we're seeing in rich countries will happen sort of naturally, if you will, in lower income countries. So these technologies are becoming, they are not there yet, but they are becoming the low-cost option in order to power economies. And when they do that, you don't need a big subsidy mechanism. You don't need a massive tax on carbon in order to have them adopted worldwide, because they are just the cheapest way to go. And so that's what kind of gives me real hope, is that my preferred solution from 15 years ago was a tax system that would have had to have lasted for all time, or a cap and trade system, or some way of making people pay for the carbon they produce. It was a never-ending solution, which would have had costs worldwide. If actually what we've got to is zero carbon technologies being the cheapest technologies out there to produce stuff, you're done. You don't need global cooperation from now until kingdom come. It's sort of, the market will take care of it, if you will. Again, we're not there, but we're a lot closer to there than I think anybody really expected 15, 20 years ago. So that's what gives me the optimism. It's not a reason to stop anything. It's not a reason to stop worrying. It's not a reason to stop fighting for more support for technology change, more support for technology adoption, and so on. But it is a reason for hope.